Nice to meet all of you virtually. I'm Jenny Onsta, the Vice President of Risk Management. Here we have Dan Hill, a familiar face to you. He teaches the new member orientation, is at the standards of advertising as well as ethics. He also is my lifeline and very patiently answers all of my questions when I call him for his knowledge. And in addition to his many accolades, he actually was the 2018 Broker of the Year. So I will hand it over to you, Dan.
Thanks so much, Jenny. And everyone, for the sake of time, let's put our questions in the chat area, and then we will address them at the end of our discussion. And if you could, please refrain from putting any specific names or brokerages in those questions. We want to keep it general in nature. So it is my distinct pleasure to very happily introduce our special guest, Veronica Kilpatrick. She's been with the Department of Real Estate since 2007 and currently serves as the District Manager and Southern California Government, Public Interest, and Law Enforcement Liaison. In this capacity, Veronica is responsible for supporting the department's mission to safeguard and promote the public interest in real estate matters through licensure, regulation, education, and enforcement in this geographic jurisdiction. So quite a large area that you're responsible for, Veronica, huh?
Yes, it's almost entirely all of Southern California.
Wow, and I would think you and I have had this discussion before. The number of licensees are pretty much centered around the Bay Area and pretty much Southern California. So you have a good number of licensees that you're responsible for overseeing, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the volume of complaints that are coming into DRE right now regarding non-compliance with COVID protocols?
So far, since we started taking those complaints, the guidance for how to open back the industry after the closure was issued on May of this year. And so since then, we started fielding complaints, and to date, we have received 92 of them. So that's not a lot of them if you consider those 92 are statewide. In the San Diego district area, which encompasses San Diego, Riverside, and Imperial County, we received 12 thus far.
Wow, so not many at all. Are you seeing any of an uptick in the last, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks or so?
No, I think they're being very spread out. I think that the licensees, at least in this area, have been very cognizant of slowing the spread of COVID. So they have been very good in compliant. At least we have not received more than 12 complaints since May. And I think May, June, July, August, September, October. So that's over 5 months. So I would say about 2 per month. So the volume is quite low.
So your volume of other complaints outside of COVID, are those remaining fairly steady?
I would say yes, steady as the same as the year before in the previous year, which is still a decrease from the years when we had the mortgage meltdown.
Okay. So what are the most common complaints you see right now?
COVID related?
COVID related, yeah, please.
Okay, so we are getting some that are from the sellers, and they complain that their agents are not complying with the protocol that they have been presented when they listed the property. They're either not cleaning prior or after a showing. They are also not following up with the agents that did not follow the complaints. There's a lot of buyer's agents that will have the paperwork signed out, and but they either are coming unannounced when the homeowners are not in the property, or they bring more than the number that they said they would bring into the property. The other complaints are from licensees, and this would be licensees who are cooperating with the agent, let's say a buyer's agent who sees that something was not adhered to, another agent that's driving by and sees an open house sign, or even agents who happen to receive an email or a flyer from another agent who appears not to be following the COVID checklist and protocol in place right now. And some of the other ones come from the public. That means that they're not attached to the transaction. They're not the buyer or the seller, but in general, they either became aware with a advertising, or they live right next to a property that is being shown, and they see that there's a lot of people coming in, they see that they're not wearing their mask, or they just see that the volume is high, or they see that their neighbors are having an open house when those are not allowed currently. So we are getting complaints from all of them. Additionally, we do get referrals from law enforcement agencies, and as well as public and health agencies, or any other agency, either local, state, or federal, that realizes that one of the offenders is a licensee. They would make contact with us, and then we will address that moving forward.
So part of what you were tasked to do in DRE was to base a certain number of your investigators to assist in this process, correct?
No. All of our investigators are open to all the COVID complaints, so we don't have a specific account.
Okay.
So the way it works is, depending on the kind of complaints, we spread them out. If we see that there's an uptick, then we would move them over. If COVID becomes more of an issue, we would assign different investigators. But right now, I think we have to. I think I have to make a differentiation. We have what we call a complaint resolution investigator, and you're right. There's only one per office, so we have 5, and those are the ones that usually attempt to handle something over a phone call, and they're usually able to do it. If it takes more of a phone call, we then assign those complaints into a regular investigator, and so then any one of the investigators in any of the offices are capable of handling those complaints. But initially, they may come more into contact with the complaint resolution investigator.
Okay, so once you receive that complaint, then what's the process that it goes through? It goes through that initial complaint resolution investigator, and then if it's something that they can't handle right away, it goes to the next investigator, and then what steps would they take?
So the first one, like I said, would be a courtesy call, and they would call both the salesperson and the broker if there's a salesperson involved, and they would attempt to say that we received a complaint where they're alleging they're not following one of the COVID protocols, and they will try to educate both the salesperson and the broker and provide the guidelines and the checklist that was put by the Cal OSHA and the Department of Public Health. They were not put by the Department of Real Estate, and they were put in place as a request by the governor so they could open the real estate industry once again. And so we always give the benefit of the doubt, although we have it in the website and there's announcements. We also are cognizant that not everyone goes to our website or is aware of the governor's order specific to this industry. So our first step is to call the licensee and make them aware of the protocol and guidelines. And if they have a question, maybe they misread it or they are having a different interpretation, then at that point, we just make sure that we clarify it, and we make sure that we get assurances that they will comply with the guidelines once they have been made aware of them by our staff. If the licensees continue to operate outside of those guidelines, then at that point we would start an investigation for negligence, and they could end up getting a citation and fine. We haven't had any of those as of yet. And if they continue to operate or defy the governor's orders, which is the guidelines are the governor's orders, then at that point we would also make a referral to Cal OSHA, which has the power to shut businesses, the Department of Public Health to investigate maybe some kind of contagion. Maybe one of the licensees was infected and they need to do contact tracing. Or the depending on the egregiousness of the acts, we would refer that to the local law enforcement agency. So far, we have not refer someone to a law enforcement agency. We do have that option. We have worked though with both Cal OSHA and the Department of Public Health, addressing some issues with licensees. In those cases that we had worked with them, both somewhere in response to a referral from the DRE to those agencies, and somewhere in response to those agencies specifically contacting us and letting us know that they were having issues with one of our licensees. Sure.
I was just going to say that's a great point, that these are not DRE regulations. You're upholding what the governor has put forth and what the law is right now. And sometimes I think, DRE is accused of making its own rules and stuff, and that's just not true. You're just following the regulations that are given to you that you're required to investigate and enforce, correct?
That is correct. When the governor shut down California for the most part, it was an executive order that as a state agency, we all have to obey when the industry was deemed essential. I know there was a point where there was a discrepancy from the national and the state. Specific guidance was drafted. And like I stated before, it was drafted by the Department of Public Health and California, Cal OSHA. So they're the ones who worked and got the approval by the governor, or in response to the governor's request, of how this industry could easily operate while allowing the essential business of real estate to continue operating, making sure that the economy was not harmed and damaged. So yes, those guidelines were not put in place by the DRE. Those guidelines were issued in response to the governor's request for this industry. And so at this point, as a state agency, our job is to make sure that we do what the governor requests of us. He is our boss. And we are supporting the mission of reducing COVID infections. And so that is why our first and foremost step, and it is education.
And it seems like that's having a pretty good effect then, judging by the results that you've discussed already.
Absolutely. I do think that, like I said, the industry is being very good. 92 complaints over almost a 6-month period. It's not high. There are some districts that do have a higher number of complaints. Like I said, San Diego area, which is the 3 counties, including Riverside, we've only seen 12. And we have not had any escalations of any of the complaints that have been coming our way.
Wow, that's good news. Can you share some of
the doing a great job.
Yeah. Well, I know SDAR and CAR are working hard to keep people educated. So it's tough though, right? People are trying to make a living, and it's tough when you have these kind of restrictions. And a lot of times what we deal with are seller questions is, why are you doing something that somebody else is not doing? And we just have to go through that education process with our clients, which I think is critical. Just talking about one of the number one complaints that you discussed was sellers being unhappy with their agents and how they're cleaning and stuff like that. I think that has to be a very clear discussion as to who's responsible for that at that initial listing appointment, and then just make sure that you're following up on it as the listing agent. So,
and some of the sellers who have raised issues, not only in the San Diego district, which is what you guys are in this area, but I also deal with the LA district that has the rest of the Southern California counties. A lot of sellers or homeowners have webcams, so they are able to very clear observe the actions or inactions of their agents. And I understand that a lot of brokers, not only the DRE, has been receiving those complaints that when they present their notice to be signed, they're making assurances, and maybe because they're busy or they forget, they don't do the initial cleaning or the after cleaning. And a lot of the viewers have been touching a lot of their personal property. So I know that some sellers are concerned that they may be infected in that manner. And I do see your point that some may feel that they're not doing enough to sell their homes. So you're right, it's an education process. I think that if besides the form that the maybe the licensees are asking the sellers to sign the one form, maybe it would be a good practice to also attach the guidance from the state, or at least at a minimum the checklist, so that way the sellers would be able to know that the order is not from you who do not want to market their home the way they will like it, but kind of say that this is what everyone should be following. And if they're not, maybe they have to make a choice on who they select, not only for the health of their families, but also if someone gets infected in that home, then there has to be a contact tracing so that the homeowner and everyone who visited would be impacted by the following or disregard of the guidance.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's some of the issues that we've discussed amongst brokers is buyers agents going into a house with a family and then ending up staying in the property and sitting around, and we're not supposed to be doing that, right? Show the property, avoid touching as much as you can, and then clean up before you leave is the ideal situation. So the used to be the nanny cam, and now it's just security systems in general and Ring. And it's I know we've had a couple where people suddenly showed up at a property without an appointment and then said they accidentally ended up there, which I don't know how they accidentally ended up there, but you need to have an appointment, and people need to know you're coming so they can be properly prepared. So what you talked about, the state guidance, the Cal OSHA, and the checklist, are those some of the educational materials that you provide to licensees and their brokers when you do get the complaint call?
That is correct. We have them posted on our website. If you go to www.dre.ca.gov, we have a picture that says COVID-19. When you click in it, you're able to see the guidance. The guidance is in lengthy description of what is expected. The checklist covers the same things, but it's more bullet point, and it has the same information, just shorthand version. We also have in that section the executive orders by the governor that affect not so much the showing of the homes, but affect the licensing timelines. If you are taking an exam, if you have scheduled continued education that is going to expire during this time, or if you're doing a renewal. We've had, I believe, 3 or 4 executive orders. The first one gave a short period of time. We thought COVID was going to be a short-lived epidemic. And the second one extended the timeframes. And we have a new one that extends the new timeframes until June of 2021. So all the information that we have is there. Like I said, I think it would be a really good tool for the licensees to actually attach that, since it does say Cal OSHA and the Department of Public Health, so that way the clients and licensees understand where the orders are coming from and why it's important for them to follow them, and why we want to protect this industry from continuing to operate and continue to be considered essential.
Great. So what are most agents right now struggling to comply with from what you guys are seeing?
You know, I don't know that I could provide a good answer, because I would just be speculating. We have received, out of those 92 complaints, we don't have a clear topic or issue. You know, they vary. And the sources also vary, like I said before, the licensing agents, competitors, not competitors, co-workers, the public, people that have that are the sellers or that are looking at the property. And a lot of the complaints differ. Some are the ones we discussed. Some have to do with unannounced open house. So we have a little bit of everything, including some brokers don't have a plan in their office. Some other ones have refused to work with the Department of Public Health when someone gets infected outside of their office. And so I don't know that I have a specific issue, but based on the number of complaints, which is minimal, I would say that there's not a lot of difficulty in adhering to the guidance.
Okay. Are you aware of what some of the actions are that law enforcement has taken for people not following COVID protocols? I know you haven't said you haven't dealt with it a lot, but is there anything that you've been in meetings and they've discussed?
You know, I think it's too early. I think it's too early for us to know. I do attend a lot of law enforcement meetings with in a lot of different counties. A lot of the agents, for example, the police department, it's local, as well as your sheriffs. The Department of Justice would be more at a higher level, and I don't know that they're I don't know that they are or would be involved, because I mean, you would need a big threshold for them to get involved. So at this point, I think it's too early. I think a lot of the law enforcement agencies are still trying to figure out what is their power and what they would be able to charge. So I haven't heard anything. I do know that they have received complaints. I don't know of one that has gone to completion, meaning I don't know if they were issued a ticket or if they were charged with a misdemeanor or a felony. So, but because the courts are closed, I don't know if some are in the pipeline, and then we would know in the near future. But as of now, I don't know law enforcement. I do know that Cal OSHA is involved, and they have the power to close businesses. I haven't learned of any here in the San Diego area, but it also may be that they're really busy and they haven't had a chance to actually let us know. So I don't want to mislead you and say that there hasn't been any actions. I'm not aware of any.
So maybe they just haven't gotten completely through the investigation and adjudication process to actually have a final result, huh?
I would say that. As to Cal OSHA, I know that they're really busy, not only with real estate, but with a lot of businesses that are in compliance. So I don't know how many they have shut down or have some fines. I think that right now, because they're too busy, I don't know that we have been able to get more information from as to their actions.
So licensees are being encouraged to report non-compliance. Why is that?
Well, the Department of Real Estate is a government agency. And like I stated before, the governor is not only our governor, but he's also our boss. And his public health policy right now is to diminish the spread of COVID. And as a government agency, we have been required and asked, and also we want to participate in this endeavor. And so we want to do our part, and we want to make sure that we do whatever is possible in our way to make sure that the spread of COVID is reduced, and that we are able to open up our economy and our way of life. And so we are supporting the governor's mission, and he has asked all of his agencies, not only the Department of Real Estate, but he has asked all the agencies to do the most that we can to support the mission of slowing the spread of COVID.
And there's an 877 number for that. We'll post that in the chat as well. It's 1-877-373-4542. 877-373-4542. Operators are standing by.
Yes.
And I know there's a link for online complaints as well on DRE.ca.gov on the Standard Department of Real Estate website. For those of you who are still stuck in about 30 months ago, I think DRE.ca.gov still works as well, but we are now Department of Real Estate, DRE.ca.gov. Is there anything else you want to share with us? Anything else you think that we should talk about that we haven't covered?
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge, once again, that I think the Southern California area has been very good with COVID. And I usually they're the leading for the other parts of the state, and not only following new guidance that comes from the DRE, but in this case from the governor. I always see that you guys are professionals and want to do what's best for your industry. So I am very happy to engage with all of this area, but especially with SDAR, who does a phenomenal job in bringing you guys information and making sure you guys have access to the latest information from the department.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of our members realize how engaged DRE is with our community. Veronica attends our risk management committee meetings once a month, as frequently as she can. She obviously has other responsibilities, but you've always been a great liaison with us, and very supportive of the mission and helping us to educate our members. And I know for me personally, I do the standards and advertising course once a quarter, and you've always been willing to provide input and advice of current problems that we're running into, and advice on changes that are happening in DRE. So I really appreciate that. I think Jenny has a number of questions. I know everybody should know that following this presentation today, we're going to upload the webinar into the YouTube library, and SDAR will be sending out an email to everyone with the link included. So feel free to share that as you wish. But let's get to some of the questions in the chat, because some of these, I think it would be good that people understand there is a delineation between DRE regulations and our code of ethics. While something may be allowed under DRE, it may not necessarily be so under our code of ethics. So Jenny, if you want to pop on and hit some of those questions, why don't we do that now?
Sure. So the first question that I have is, I'm selling a new home currently in construction. We advertise open house by appointment only. We ask them to sign the deed prior to showing or coming, and ask them to sanitize hands and use masks before entering. Is this a good way to do it?
I don't see anything objectionable in that question. The only thing that I would caution against is putting open house signs, because they give the impression, even though you may try to use them as for directional purposes, they may give the impression that you are asking the public who sees the open house signs to follow them into going to the property.
Okay. And then along the same lines, I have, hi there, just to be clear, no door knocking and no flyers.
That is not in the guidance that was offered by the governor. So I think that a lot of the homeowners would object to that and would probably or likely contact us.
So that information is that is a CAR guidance principle: no door knocking, no flyers, should not be any paper materials at the property. Everything, we are still in that state where we're supposed to be doing initial showings virtually, but should not have flyer boxes in front of the properties. You can have one sheet of paper there that people can't take, but they can take pictures of, or use a QR code or something like that. And that's based on Gov. Hutchinson's advice at CAR and our leadership calls that we've been doing every Friday, and now I think we're going to go to bi-weekly. But now that we're popping into purple, who knows, that could change as well.
That could change.
Yeah. So one of the big questions was handing out pumpkins, and you know, we're not supposed to be handing anything that results in hand-to-hand contact is the ultimate goal. We're supposed to be limiting that. So hopefully that answers the question.
And then our next question, has there been any cases where someone contracted COVID 100% specifically from a home showing?
I don't know the answer to that one. I do know that not in this area, but in another area, several agents were infected, but I couldn't tell whether it was at the home or in the office. And that was one of the cases that was reported to us by the Department of Public Health.
And then a common question that I received that just popped up is the open house signs, where it says, but the sign says by appointment only.
We've had some of the complaints, especially in this area, that address that. And the risk is not everyone follows the rules. And we've had complaints from neighbors and from other agents saying that although it says that, once the individuals show up at the property, the agents are letting them in because they do not want to miss out on a possible buyer. So I don't know, it says by appointment only. I don't know how many people would actually disregard that or just say, let's just go check it out anyway. And I know that that issue has been raised, and it has been brought up both by homeowners, neighbors, and licensees in some part. You know, whether that is working and they follow the rules, someone could still take that as saying it's not proper, and they would still file a complaint with us, and the DRE would still be forced to contact the licensee and find out. You know, some things, sometimes you could have a sign, but do the opposite, so we would have to verify that.
And then
And from the guidance from CAR, I mean, the key is that it does have that by appointment only on there. But again, it's if Veronica's department receives that complaint, they're going to have to do something to research it further. So just proceed with caution. We've heard examples of people doing that very successfully. There's no paperwork at the property. If they come, they have to distance down the street 6 feet apart, wear masks, all of that. And neighbors are watching this. So keep in mind, a lot of the calls that I know that brokers are receiving, it has to do with neighborhood members, community members making the phone calls to say, hey, I thought you weren't allowed to do this. So just keep that in mind. Everything should be done electronically. So you can submit the PV electronically while you're standing in front of the property. The question is, how does that appear to the public? And I think that's a question probably based on your broker or manager guidelines. So I would probably refer you there first.
And then were the sellers complaining during the listing period or after? I'm curious about the listing agent seller relationship in those cases.
I think at both stages. I think some of them with their security cameras have noticed that whatever was stated to them or given to them in writing that a broker would do, for example, open windows, open doors, open cabinets, so the buyers don't have to do any of that. When they would use, they would wash their hands, use sanitizer, and then after the showing, they would go back and clean any area that was touched or just make sure that they put it back together. They have seen that that's not being done, and I know in some occasions they, I don't know if they feel betrayed, but they felt like the agent is not doing what they said they were going to do. So at some points, they're trying to use that behavior to cancel the listing. And we have seen some, at the later stages. So it just depends.
And then I have another question. What happens once there's a complaint, whether founding violation or not? Does this go in your file, and for how long?
Would you repeat that? You were warbling out a little for me. I couldn't hear it.
What happens once there's a complaint, whether founding violation or not? Does this go in your file, and if so, for how long?
We always keep all complaints on file. They don't go away. But we also have a statute of 3 years. So a lot of the times, even if it's not COVID related, all complaints remain on file, because sometimes we find that there's a pattern or same allegations. And so we use those complaints as background or in aggravation matters. If we find violations of real estate law, then we proceed accordingly, either through a correction action letter, through sign fine if it's necessitates more, or through an accusation that is filed seeking formal disciplinary action. If there is no violations, we actually close a case and let you know that for the moment, we won't, the matter is closed, but like I said, the complaints do remain in file. Most of the time, those complaints, they don't go anywhere. Like I said, we have a statute of limitations of 3 years. And once the complaints are closed, there's no further action. There are some occasions where we may need to reopen a case if it shows a pattern of behavior.
And then what if during a showing, the buyers wears gloves? We still must clean those areas touched.
I'm sorry, could you repeat again?
Basically, if you're wearing gloves during showing, you still have to clean those areas that were touched.
I don't know what representations the listing agent made to their sellers or to the other agent. So I would go with that. And I can't say that one thing is better than the other one. As long as you follow the guidelines, then you should be okay.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, Betty, that's your question. I would say that while it may not be mandatory that you clean because they wore gloves, I think it's just a good practice to ask them to wipe down while they're leaving anyway, just in case. I've watched people wear gloves and then they go out and they touch everything in their car and everything around their car, and then they take them off and then they wash their hands. And it's like, well, you just contaminated everything around you by whatever you touched on the way out of the building. So I think in that case, just the prudent thing is that you're better off over cleaning than under cleaning, just so that it's not an issue. And again, from a risk management standpoint, especially if you've got a seller that's very sensitive about the process, I would say overdo it as opposed to underdo it. There's a couple more in here. Jenny, you're having some issues with your audio. Let me go back a couple. There's one in here. As a property manager, can we have sign boxes without flyers in front of our properties? Robert, I guess technically you can, but I guess my question would be, is the impression going to be that you had flyers out there and now they're empty, so you are distributing flyers? You don't want to cause people to have questions that they don't need to ask, I guess would be my advice on that. If you have a broker, I would talk to the broker about that. If you are the broker, we can talk offline about that if you want to reach out to me. You can email me at askbrokerdan@gmail.com and I can follow up with you offline. If you have a by appointment sign up and an agent disregards the showing and shows the property, isn't that an ethics type violation? If they're not following the rules and the standards, so again, we have a couple of things that we have to follow. We follow the state law, we follow whatever the county and the city put out, as well as the DRE and what their oversight is. And then we have our code of ethics. So that may very well be an ethics violation. If they are not abiding by the rules that you put into the MLS, that would be an MLS issue as well. So if that is occurring, the first step I would think would be to contact the broker and have that conversation broker to broker. So discuss that with your broker, whatever their policy is. I know I've had a few of those conversations and the results went extremely well, and they were very, very professional. So I think the first thing is transparency and communication with the other side before we get to the point of having to basically kind of blow things up. There are some agents that are not trained in exactly what they're supposed to do. So they're out just making their best judgment. Sometimes they just need one of us to step in and have a conversation with their broker so that they can correct that action. And that's exactly what DRE is doing. I mean, most of the time, if you've never had dealings with the DRE, the first thing that they look for is education. Can we educate? And then if you don't follow that education, then we go to the next step, which is typically cite and fine or some type of an administrative process. But the DRE's goal is not to hunt us down and to do those things, is to help make sure that they're protecting the public and that we are doing things the right way.
You are correct. And if that was the case and it doesn't, you could also call the department, and that's when our complaint resolution investigators will call and try to make sure that they do what Dan said. We will educate them, say, did you know? Maybe it's lack of training, maybe it was a misunderstanding. And so I know that somehow you may feel that by calling us, you are turning your people in, and it would be a bad action. But I think in this case, or in any case, if someone is either harming the public or the industry, I think it would be a good thing to call us. We don't revoke the license when someone calls. I think that's the fear that if you call, something bad is going to happen, and actually it's the opposite. Like Dan said, even if it's non-COVID, we usually, if we'll give you a call, especially if it has to do with compliance items, licensing, first point of contact. We will first try to get you to comply, and usually there's no further action. When we do go to cite and fine or file an accusation, it's because if it's a compliance issue, the licensee has failed to be responsive to our request, or it's super egregious that we can't, someone took money, for example, that's something egregious. But other than that, our job as a regulatory agency is not to punish anyone, but it's to get the industry to know the regulations that they may not know, and just to get them in compliance, because it will benefit them, it'll benefit the department, and it'll benefit the public.
So we're back to another question about open houses. Can we do open houses by appointment? I think there in of itself, if you're showing by appointment, it's technically not an open house. The complaints that are being received, and I know that these complaints have gone to the governor's office and they've gone to the mayor's office with people calling in about agents putting out open house signs, is the representation to the public. And again, that's what our Article 12 is in our Code of Ethics, is about advertising and a true representation of what we're trying to communicate. Are we deceiving the public in some way in our advertising that would lead them to believe something different than what we're actually doing? So the stress has been on not using the open house terminology, but using a shown by appointment type of terminology. And some agents are attaching those to their open house signs, which is mandatory. If you're going to have an open house sign, it has to have something attached on there about being shown by appointment. Again, I would talk to your manager or broker and find out what your broker's policy is on that. And there's a follow-up. Can I have a bandit sign advertising me as an agent in my own yard? I don't know specifically what bandit sign refers to. I think that's just signs that get put out through neighborhoods, and they're not really a for sale sign, but they're advertising your services. Again, I think that would be a question of, are you representing the property that people are going to have the impression that it is for sale when it is not? And that would be, I think, a misrepresentation of what you're doing. Do you have any comments on that, Veronica?
No, I think I agree with you. I think that it depends on what the advertisement says and how it's placed, because it could give the perception that that home is for sale, and someone may call and may feel it's a bait and switch and misrepresentation. And it could also, it depends on what you're going to write. As long as you're very clear on, I'm advertising my services, this is not the property that I'm selling, and you have all the first point of contact requirements. If you're a salesperson, you have the name of your broker, you have your license number, and your broker permits you to do that, and then it could be done. But you have to be very careful that people do not think that you're advertising the property or that you're not complying with all the first point of contact requirements.
And I think that answers your follow-up as well. It would be my business card, just letting people know I'm an agent. Again, it's what the representation is. And for me as a broker, I look at it as, what is my agent trying to convey? Is it clear? Would it be clear to to the average citizen of what we're doing, and that there's no misrepresentation. And then the final part of that is, am I willing to defend that action as a broker? Because Veronica's department is going to reach out to me, and ultimately I'm the one that's going to be accountable and responsible for what that agent is doing. So as I teach in all of my classes, the first point of reference is your manager or broker to make sure what they are doing. And then we've got a couple other good points. Why wouldn't all listing brokers have their lockboxes programmed to require an access code that would prevent unauthorized showings? Absolutely. We have a lot of different avenues to that we didn't have 20 or 30 years ago. We don't have to put out, and hopefully you're not using as a main lockbox source some type of a combo lockbox that you can't monitor and control. That is part of our responsibility, is controlling access to the seller's property, because you're responsible for that. If something were to happen, that your clients are going to look to you. CBS codes, right, you can put into the MLS or in the lockbox. What is the governor and DRE rule on door knocking right now?
I think, Dan, you addressed that a little while ago. I think you've said CAR has given guidance that that's not
Yes, CAR.
That's not a good practice.
Yes, CAR's interpretation of the governor's mandate is that we should not be door knocking. We should not be dropping flyers on doorsteps. We should not be leaving flyers inside the properties. Agents can program their boxes remotely. Yep, that too. Thanks, Kevin. How is it determined that COVID was contracted in a specific listing? Well, I can tell you it. I'll tell you from my experience what I saw probably about 7 or 8 weeks ago was the county hired 100 additional medical investigators. So anytime someone tests positive, depending on the location, I know that we had somebody that we're familiar with whose baby got COVID in the hospital, and CDC was all over that. They immediately start interviewing people to find out where they are. They can determine when they were contagious, and that sets the guideline of how they possibly contracted. And then they start interviewing everybody that was around there to try and determine if they have maybe like a super spreader event, right? Or a case where somebody is constantly violating the law and infecting people. So Veronica, your experience on that?
I just wanted to add that every agency, including the DRE, was required to provide 5% of our workforce for contact tracing purposes. In our case, the classes that were impacted were the special investigator, the associate government program analysts. And so actually 4 of my staff in Los Angeles are engaged in contact tracing, which is what you just described. And they have been assigned to different counties. I know I have 2 of them are helping the Imperial County with their contact tracing, and the other ones are in Los Angeles. And so part of that is, Kevin and Dan, you're right. Someone gets sick and they start asking, where were you? What did you do? And then they start contacting those other persons to build their contact tracing. So we send our staff over to for assignment to the Department of Public Health, who assign them to the local counties back in May. So since then, they've been doing that. And like I said, we did have a case in another county where the Department of Public Health contacted us and told us about an office that had multiple members infected. So it wasn't at the listing per se, but it was at the broker's office where they were all interacting. That I don't know where the original contagion happened, but I do know that it was transferred at the broker's office.
Yeah, and Kevin Burke brought up a good point. It's not really a case that you want to defend whether it's accurate or not, or where it came from. From a broker perspective, our goal is to keep the doors open so agents can do business. So we have a requirement that you take your temperature anytime you enter the office, and we log that. And if someone doesn't want to have their temperature taken, they can't enter the office. And it's up for brokers to set down those guidelines and policies based upon what Cal OSHA has sent out. For us, it's what's been interpreted by CAR. And you know, again, it goes back to your manager and your broker of even though in some cases something may not be necessarily wrong, the question is, do you want to defend it? And the analogy that I use is, if you have a green light and you see somebody getting ready to run the cross intersection red light, just because you have the right of way, do you exercise it, or are you prudent and you stop and let them run the red light? And it's similar to this. We're trying to meet everyone in a place where they're at, and everybody is dealing with this situation differently. And I can tell you that 100% of real estate as an industry is not on board with being open and doing showings and everything else as it is right now. So keep in mind, everybody is not in the place where you may be. So let's come from curiosity and find out what somebody's thinking or what they're feeling, and do our best to try and help one another, because everything takes a little bit longer right now. And I think we have to be patient with that process. And DRE is there to help, I think, to help get us through this. And so far, it seems like we're doing really, really well. I mean, a number of 92 since May, I think is astronomically low. So I imagine there's probably a lot of broker to broker phone calls that are happening to avoid those additional calls being made, but the resources are there. Does anybody else have any other questions? Let me see what else I have here. That's all I see. Before we sign off, is there anything else that you want to cover? Anything else that you want to share with us, Veronica? We're about 4 minutes from our original cutoff time, so we're right on schedule.
I think we've covered everything related to COVID, and maybe a little more about how complaints are handled. The one thing that I don't know if everyone's aware is the I'm gonna forget the website, so let me look it up really quick. We have a new resource for landlords and for tenants who may be experiencing difficulties due to COVID related. And we do have a page that was actually put on at the request of the governor again by the Department of Real Estate, and it's called Housing is Key. And it provides resources for both landlord and tenants. And at the website is landlord-tenant.dre.ca.gov. If you encounter any of your clients that have any of these issues, it's a great tool. We continue to put links for resources for both the tenants and the landlords. And pretty soon we are going to be executing a contract with the local 211 calls, and usually that's a number that you call to get information from your county. And pretty soon the 211 line, anyone's going to be able to call them, and they're going to be able to give them those links or those contacts and references and information on how to navigate issues, either because they can't pay the rent, or because they're landlords, or because the tenants can make the rent and they need some assistance.
And that's landlordtenant.dre.ca.gov.
Yes.
And yeah, there've been a couple questions too. Is this recorded? Yes, it's recorded, and it's going to be uploaded to SDAR's YouTube channel, and a link will go out later to everyone who's in attendance.
And other than that, I'm glad to have participated in this. I hope that it provided you enough information that would let you know that the DRE is not here to get you. We want you to call us, but it's because we like the engagement and we want to be able to educate you. We're not here to take your license away or your livelihood. We just want to make sure that together we improve the real estate industry.
Veronica, as always, it's great to see you, and thank you so much for sharing and being an ally with SDAR and with our real estate community. I really appreciate it. Jenny, do you have anything else in closing?
I do not. Thank you everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of your Monday.
Thanks again, Veronica.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Jen.
you.
Need more help? Contact SDAR Member Services at 858-715-8040 or membership@sdar.com.